Welcome back. There was a recording issue last time. I did comment on all the Encyclopedia Galactic entries, but the recording apparently cut out, so I'm going to have to repeat what I did before. The Jacinto is, in fact, this should, hopefully, unless there's another recording issue, be the last video in my Journey to Foundation series. The Jacinto is a real thing, or not a real thing in the real world, but a real thing in the Universe of Foundation. It is something invented by Asimov, and it is mostly used. I believe the original usage was the original mention of it was used for disposing of papers that were no longer necessary, or in fact, I think might have wanted to be kept secret. Imperial News Service, yes, real thing. Again, in the universe, was, I think, Cheddar Hummin worked for it. From Anacreon to Tazenda is interesting because Anacreon, of course, has a major role. Tazenda is one of the locations considered for Star's End, partially based on how similar the names are. And in the sky, it makes a certain amount of sense if you say it is Star's End, because it would be at the end of the stars. But it would be kind of a weird thing to say here because it was a very minor, small group of systems. So you probably wouldn't mention it there. Anacreon makes sense both alphabetically and because it is, in fact, at one extreme end of the galaxy. This, again, should be Millennium, not Millennia. They really seem to have trouble with that one here. Broadcast underwent strict censorship. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Cheddar Hummin mentioned that. Microfood, artificially hydroponically grown foodstuff, major product of Mycogen. They made luxury microfoods. Lower quality microfoods were made. You often saw them in roadside diners. They had one common side effect they had on Outworlders, or at least some small fraction of Outworlders, was diarrhea. So, as mentioned here, they put anti-diarrheal medications in the milkshakes that they served along with it. Cheddar Hummin explains this to Harry Seldon at one point. Which, I gotta say, to me, has always seemed wrong. You'd think that the possible consequences of putting medications of any sort into someone's food without their knowledge, they might have allergies. I feel like that would actually probably be worse than the potential consequences of diarrhea, but never mind that. However, this classic spacer here, no, that is completely wrong. Spacers were not a thing at that point. Spacers were the first group of settlers from Earth. They settled 50 other planets. The Mycogens are distantly descended from some spacers. There may or may not be other groups in the Empire that are descended from spacers. We'll never know. The only spacer planet that still exists, or at least that is still exists and has continuity with the original spacers, is Solaria, which is kind of a special case. Pyrus. Emperor Agus I was the last emperor of Harry Seldon's lifetime. He was eventually disappeared for showing the Commission of Public Safety had him disappeared for showing independence. Pirates are mentioned in many places in the series. For instance, the Mule took control of Pirate Warband, which is his stepping stone to taking control of Calgan. Klingon II is mentioned to have been his grandfather was a pirate warlord of a small planet. This thing here is not directly mentioned. Again, Millennium, not Millennia. This thing here, though, about piracy becoming so common that pilots would refuse to ship goods to the outer worlds, that is not directly mentioned. However, it is true that trade broke down later on, and it would make sense as the power of the Empire receded, that it would become harder for them to enforce that, or they, in fact, wouldn't even try to enforce law in areas they no longer control, and that would make sense as a reason why trade was decreasing. Peddler's Place. This mention here, I'm not sure if it was ever mentioned his first name before, but Golan Farcourt III. Golan was the first name of Golan Trevize. He's usually referred to as by his last name, Trevize, who is the protagonist of Foundation's Edge and Foundation in Earth. There are some reuses of these fictional names. For instance, Stettin is used for at least two characters. Farquhar III, I do wonder if that's supposed to be a reference to Lord Farquaad from Shrek. This is an accurate description of iridium in the real world, hard, brittle, and silvery white. I don't think iridium would be a good choice for superstructure. It would be too heavy, and iron is way more common anyway. However, also a key component of positronic technology. True, that was what the positronic planes were made of, but the writers of the Encyclopedia Galactica should not know that. Positronic brains had long been forgotten by the time this was created. Iridium would be somewhat easier for them to come by in the era of in the far future than it would be for us, because iridium is much more common in asteroids, which they would have much easier access to than we do. Imperial Survey Corps is mentioned in Forward the Foundation. They were the ones who first surveyed Terminus and helped him. Yeah, as is mentioned here, in fact. Such was the case with Terminus itself prior to the trial of Harry Seldon. Yeah. That is the first mention of Terminus in Forward the Foundation. They mentioned some stuff found by the Imperial Survey Corps. This part here about them being considered sole property of the reigning emperor is an extremely important point in the section of the Foundation called the Mayors. Because although Terminus is essentially within the Anacreon province and is surrounded by the Anacreonians, is not technically part of the Anacreonian province. It is considered the direct property of the Emperor. So this doesn't seem right to me, that the Empire, for most of history, maybe by the time this takes place, yes, because the Empire had begun to recede. Well, in fact, it had receded pretty significantly. At this point, it was restricted to the inner third of the galaxy, volume-wise. It still controlled 3/4 of the population of the galaxy, because the innermost sections of the galaxy are much more densely populated, because there are just a lot more stars there. However, it seems weird for the Empire at its height to have had a diplomatic corps, because they controlled everything. There was nowhere for them to send diplomats to. And often constructed following systems induction into the Empire, okay, that makes no sense whatsoever, because in this case, if it's part of the Empire, you definitely do not need to send diplomats there. You could send representatives, but you just wouldn't call them diplomats. Wait. Empire. This is an interesting way of reconciling some things. Delicass and Ashaya are both mentioned. The exact context doesn't really matter. In the original series, Trantor was part of the Galactic Corps. It was later in Foundation that it's relocated to being in one of the arms near the Galactic Core in the physical sense. So what this is saying is, as a way to reconcile those, is that the Galactic Core for these people does not mean the physical hub of the galaxy. It's a sociological or economic term, or even political term, referring to those places close to Trantor. I don't know if the term inner world is ever used. They do mention at one point the inner star systems, which are described as having people with slanted eyes, or at least the moon are described as having slanted eyes, which presumably means they have Asian ancestry, I would assume, which, again, contradicts some things said in The Currents of Space. The periphery, yes, very important thing. The outer rim of the galaxy. The Galactic Empire starts losing influence near the edge, and that slowly works its way towards the center. Trantor, very important. Yes, absolutely true. Located extremely densely populated, industrially advanced. densest and richest population site was well in excess of 40 billions. That, I think, is an actual quote from the Encyclopedia Galactica in one of the books. However, if you look at the really early versions published in the magazine, the number was actually much higher. It was in the trillions. That was for some reason reduced to 40 billion in the book version. Yes, I'm not sure if this is a direct quote or not, but it is definitely true that the dependence upon the outer world for food and indeed all necessities of life made Trantor increasingly vulnerable to conquest. Extremely true. That was a major point Selden raised in this first part of Foundation, the historians, as to why the Empire was doomed to fall. It became an increasingly tempting prize and also increasingly vulnerable. A court at one point mentioned in, I think it was either Foundation and Empire or Second Foundation, the total number of ships that land on Trantor every day carrying food and so forth was greater than the number of all the ships in the Empire's armed forces total throughout all of its 12,000-year history. This was somewhat revamped in Prelude to Foundation, where it's mentioned that although they do import a lot of food, they also grow a lot normally, because I guess Asimov realized that logistically it wouldn't be possible to support that many people just on imports. I don't remember any reference to Getorin, but given how specific that is, I feel like it must be a reference to something that I'm not remembering. Nitrogen sector, extremely important. I mentioned them earlier as producers of luxury foodstuffs. They are probably based on New York's Orthodox Jewish community, as most things in Trantor were based on parts of New York City. Rich, yes, I'm pretty sure this is a direct quote from its mention in the Encyclopedia Galactica in Prelude to Foundation. This is not true. Monopoly on luxury microfood production. No. It makes the best luxury microfood. It is not the only producer of luxury microfood. Yes, absolutely true. This is an important plot point in Forward the Foundation, politically. That it is a subject of ridicule. Fairly or unfairly, that is the case. Bill a button, yep. I'm pretty sure this whole thing is a direct quote from the Encyclopedia Galactica. Bit about them carrying knives, yes, extremely important sociological thing. They carry knives. Dorse Finabile, it is noted, is able to use a knife perfectly from the first time she uses it without practice, which is an important clue that there's more going on with her than meets the eye. Other planets, god damn it. Loris. Although there is a Loris the Sixth mentioned as the Emperor, and after whom the previous enclosure was most famously used by, Loris may be one of the four kingdoms. It may be just a region. It may be just a planet. It's a little unclear, but anyway, that is unrelated to the name of the Emperor. Primary named for Emperor Loris the Sixth. Yeah, this is something the game invented. That's named for Loris the Sixth. Loris, blah, blah, blah. Smyrna, one of the two parts of the four kingdoms that have names. It was where Hober Mallow was born. One of the four kingdoms to secede from the Galactic Empire. Yes, true. Perhaps most well known as the birthplace of master trader Hober Mallow. Also true. Economy relied heavily on mining, with Smyrna having lead and coal exports. That is a reference to... Hober Mallow mentions that he is the son of a coal miner. So that is basically the only thing we know about Smyrna, is that it had coal mining. So that is presumed. They apparently have decided that they're going to base their entire economy on coal mining. This is the thing you often see in expansions of previous works. The first member, like you see this with the first member of a species that's shown on planets, then the whole species gets cut based on them. So like Jabba the Hutt in Star Wars, he was a crime lord. Well, now all the Hutts are crime lords. Ula, that Twi'lek dancing girl, was the first Twi'lek we've seen. Now or at least the first female Twi'lek. Now all the Twi'leks are dancers or strippers or something like that. Terminus, very famous. This is an actual quote. Its location was an odd one, etc., etc. This whole thing is a direct quote from the Encyclopedia as presented in the books. Calgan, Pleasure World originally, later taken over by the Mule, became its base for his assault on the Foundation. Siwenna, the province of the Empire closest to the Foundation. It is the birthplace of Onum and Dusambar. It was capital. Yes, Onumbar mentions this. That it was originally capital. Hober Mallow comes there. He has an out-of-date map. The stars don't move around much, but political boundaries do. He goes to the right system, but it is no longer the capital of the sector. This is basically what happened. The Viceroy attempted a coup against the Imperial throne, but behind the lines, his own people rebelled against him. But the Admiral, whose name is not given in the original books, but is apparently given here, wanted the glory, and his men wanted the plunder, so he was unhappy about this, so he said that they were guilty of treason for rebelling against their lawfully appointed viceroy, so that he could have the plunder. He eventually was later assassinated by Dusambar. Helicon, planet on which Harry Seldon was born. The name obviously sounds like Helix. However, that was not originally intended when Asimov created it. He came up with the name first. It is later revealed that they are known for practitioners of martial arts card twisting, which of course is a reference to the Helix, but the name Helicon came long before twisting came around. In fact, although Harry Seldon is a practitioner of these martial arts, and that's shown a lot in Prelude to Foundation, the name of the martial art is not revealed until Forward the Foundation, when he actually doesn't even do that much of it because he's getting too old. One thing that is interesting is that although Harry Seldon is supposed to be this expert martial artist, this is kept realistic. He's not a total action hero. When he's up against street punks, this works fine. The minute a professional soldier shows up, Sergeant Pember, Part Sergeant, whatever the hell that sergeant's name was, it becomes much less effective. He basically tosses Harry Seldon around without that much effort. This, I think, is a direct quote. The Legends of Doubtful Authenticity thing. This is dependent on the policy of Pax Imperium, surrounded as it was by a larger, more developed plans. Yes, that is something Harry Seldon mentions to Cheddar Hummon when he talks about why Helicon has always been loyal to the Empire, because they depend on the Empire for protection. In martial arts flourish, yes. That, as I mentioned, I told you about the martial arts. Ascone was a small group. It was originally in the section of... so the story was originally called The Wedge. It was retitled The Traitors in the book. They actually changed it significantly between the original story and the book. They changed the order, first of all. In the original story, that story took place after Hober Mallow, after the Merchant Princes were taking over. In the book, it was moved to before then, and when the Foundation was still depending on its policy of religious expansionism. They also renamed the character. In the original book, the character who was the protagonist of that story was also the traitor who was sent to spy on Belriose in Foundation and Empire. In the books, they gave him different names. A decomposite character turned them into different people. This is true. Ancestral interdict on advanced technology, especially nuclear power, to associate with the old Imperial regime. Yes, that's true. Although it is also mentioned that while they don't do anything new, if they have a working piece of technology from the Imperial period, they will still use it. Technology has fallen so far since then that their Coast Guard, essentially, their military, which is military organization, they use civilian craft from the age of the Empire, which are better than anything they can produce now. Lifted following. Yep, this is telling the story of the Wedge, aka the Traitors. Anacreon, largest, most powerful of the four kingdoms. Yes, as says here, contain 25 solar systems, 6 of which include habitable planets. Those numbers don't seem right to me. I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but only 6 of them having habitable planets, I think, is wrong. Yep, these are twice attempted. That's the first and second crises were both about that. This thing about the royal sport of nyak hunting, I don't remember it being infamous, but it is mentioned that the king, the boy king, Leopold I, who was king during the Second Crisis, was a skilled Nyak hunter, and he bets that by the age of something or other, 25, I think, he will have killed this many Nyaks after a successful bet. And he says, we'll take the bet. But as the book says, courtiers do not place bets against the king's skill, for there is always the deadly danger of winning. The name given to those portions of the Nacron sector which broke away from the First Empire in the early years, the foundational deformity, blah, 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 blah. Yep, this is true, and I think at least this last sentence here, the largest, most powerful, etc., is a direct quote. And that is it. This is going to be a very short video, apparently. Shorter than I thought. Goodbye. Thank God I won't have to do any more of these.